My name's Kate Mason and I am from Community Voice Australia Central Coast. We're just doing a follow-up interview with Kate and Steve, who are in the purple zone. And we did an interview about a month ago talking about the Bayvarol strips put in the hive. So we're just doing a catch-up as to where you're both up to, what you found out in the meantime.
Okay, well, the DPI came back to me. Chrissy is one of the reps of the DPI. She said that she would be interested in doing further testing on the hives I've got out at Nora Head, and I explained to her that as a result of what I believe is the poisoning of the hives and the lack of follow-up from the DPI, I said there'd be no further testing happening on my hives. She did mention her or another one of them did mention it would be it's a mandated thing, and I said, well, look, we'll have to enter into you'll have to elevate it to a micro, what do they call it, a biosecurity measure, a problem, I said, well, you'll have to elevate it to that, because I said, we're not doing the hives anymore. And when I finally got through and explained the reasons why, she said, well, I'll refer it to my boss, and I'm sorry, but his name, I just can't remember his name at the moment. But he came back to me, and he's a beekeeper too. And he said, look, I understand what your concerns are. And he said, let's get your hives tested, your wax and your honey. They're going to come out and test a drum of honey that I've taken after the testing. They're going to take wax and honey from one of the hives that were tagged. And I've directed them down to Kate's hives too, to take a sample as well.
And conveniently, there's a laboratory in Wagga Wagga now rather than in Germany.
Okay.
And they said, where are you going to, that's a good point. Where are you going to get these tests? They said, we'll take it down to our labs in Wagga, or down that way anyway. And I said, okay, that's good. Well, it's a lot closer than Germany. And we'll get it tested. Now, I then, interestingly enough, I got a phone call back from Chrissy after that. And she said, look, I'm just going to go away for Easter, so I want to get my schedule in place. She said, now I know that you're going to get your hives tested, and you're going to get the wax and your honey tested, which is great. That's a good move forward. Now, can I schedule in your hives from Nora Head? And I said, well, no, we can't. I said, until I get the results back of these of the tests to see exactly what's in the hives. Oh, yeah, well, we're going to go ahead with that, but can I get you to, basically engage and commit to testing the hives over at Nora Head? And I said, well, no. I said, I'm not interested in engaging in that at the moment until we've got the results of the test. And since then, I've received an absolute plethora of treatments and information that's going on overseas about the Varroa and what is being done. And I'm going to read through all that information that I've been given and send that on to them and say, look, guys, there's more to be done here. And really, I'm just not interested in putting this poison in my hives. Even if there's a 0.0004% remaining of the poison in the hives, I'm just not interested in that being in my hives. You know what I mean?
Well, the reality is the Bayvarol strips are a treatment, not a preventative. We've already had them put in as a preventative once, and now within 6 months, they want to come in and do it a second time, and our hives are still Varroa mite free. So why would you put them back in?
So it's the same hives?
The same hives, they want to put more strips in.
Right. And you're still in the purple zone, hasn't gone into the red zone?
Still in the purple zone.
Yeah.
When they put these strips back in, there's a lot of questions too that, I'm not a specialist in this area. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. But by adding the hives in, as Kate says, as putting this poison back in the hive again, does it compound the infection and take it from 0.0004 to 0.0008? Or does it just continue at 0.0004? We don't know until they do all this sort of stuff. And it just seems to be, particularly when one of them did say to me, no, I read the biosecurity order and it said that no testing has been done. This is an emergency response, And
nowhere in the world are these strips continuously put in over and over again within a 12-month period. If Varroa is in your hive, they'll put it in as a treatment once before harvest season, and they want to do it a second time in clean hives. It's insane.
So what's the time frame with getting the honey tested in Wagga Wagga?
Well, they haven't shown up.
How long ago did that happen? How long ago were you told this could happen?
I've got to say to you, my grasp on time has been lost, because I've been helping my brother he's a cancer patient, and I'm sort of helping him at the moment. My days are focused in on him. But it would have been at least a week to 2 weeks since I've spoken to them, and they were going to come back to me. And like I said, Chrissy was trying to get her schedule in order before Easter, so that she knows what she's going to be doing after Easter. But I said, well, we'll talk about it when the results come back. So the results aren't in at this point in time,
Okay, so this is something other people could be doing, reaching out to the DPI to get their honey and wax tested.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And mentioning that all of a sudden there's a lab in Wagga, not Dresden, Germany, that we were initially offered. At our expense.
And I think there's another issue here too. I think it falls on the DPI to pay for these tests. I didn't put this stuff in my hives; they did, and they assured me that it was completely free of any harm to the bees or the hives. And
at the very least, offer us the services of the Wagga lab, not Dresden, Germany, which was, I don't even understand that.
And the Wagga lab is free, or you have to pay for it?
Well, they're paying for it now.
On this occasion, the DPI said, "Look, we'll pay for it, and we'll get your wax and your honey tested." And there's so many issues here. It's getting so confused and messed up.
I have been chatting to a couple up in Cessnock who are in a purple zone and basically going through the same sort of thing. And there is a lady, and I don't have names, but she's in Newcastle in a red zone. She still has her hives. She's put a no trespass sign on her fence. When the DPI shows up, she gives them a fee schedule for her time and insists that they sign their name and address and details, which they refuse to do. And in refusal, they're not allowed on the property. And her hives are still intact. And that's the common law approach that she's taking. I'm going to do the same thing in case they show up. And basically, I even post tests when and if that happens, I'm not putting these strips back in the hives.
Okay.
There's just absolutely no evidence in the world that this is how you do things. Varroa-free hives, a second round of Bayvarol strips for what purpose?
And we're 9 months into this emergency orders now, aren't we, with the killing of the bees? And when it was first discovered in Newcastle, the Varroa mite, I think it was June last year. So we're 9 months in.
I mean, November, the first lot of strips have gone in, and now we're in March and they want to do a second round. So it's incredibly crazy.
Yeah. So this is the chair of Community Voice Australia Central Coast. And he sent off a letter to the Australian Government Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, the secretary, who is responsible for the National Management Group. And so the National Management Group and Plant Health are the two main groups who are holding this emergency plant pest response deed, which this all fits under. And so we asked them a number of questions. What is their definition of success and failure regarding the Varroa mite emergency response phase? So 9 months on, they're still saying successful eradication of Varroa mite is the aim of the emergency response. And we asked has it failed by their definitions, their response. It has not failed, as activities to eradicate Varroa mite are continuing consistent with the response plan endorsed by the management group. So again, they just say the current advice provided to them from the expert technical committee is that it's feasible to kill all the Varroa mite and cost beneficial to eradicate. We asked what their assessment process for determining when they need to transition from an emergency response phase to a management response phase regarding Varroa mite, and where are they up to in that process. And here they just basically says when the management group determines that eradication of the EPP, the emergency plant pests, is not feasible, when it should come to an end, in which case, so it's basically saying it's sort of saying government speak. It's not saying we were asking specifically, where are you up to in your plan? And we're just getting a very vague answer back, which doesn't tell us any details as to when they'll assess that needs to be the case. And an assessment of transition has not been undertaken, as based on the current evidence, it's considered that Varroa mite remains technically feasible and cost beneficial to eradicate. So they're not actually assessing whether or not they should transition 9 months on from the Varroa mite still spreading, and a lot of things being killed in the meantime. And then we asked about, regarding the pest risk assessment process used in industry biosecurity plans, how can we access the National Management Group's findings, or findings you rely on regarding step 6 to 8? And I think from memory, those steps 6 to 8 was when they're starting to go from the emergency plan to the plan of action. And here again, we just get a bit of a runaround. Biosecurity plans are different from a response plan and are developed and owned by the relevant peak industry body. So developed in association with Plant Health Australia, and include input from the Australian government and state and territory governments. So basically, we got really a no answer to, we were asking specifically where things were up to. We also wrote to the chair of Plant Health 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago and still haven't heard anything back. So it's not looking like there's any plans of this stopping.
Very, very interesting indeed. I mean, it's just something you're going to have to, so we're going to have to hold our ground and
people have to
see
stop
where the
complying.
DPI take this. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. What we have found is we've resisted, and they are trying to seek a compromise. It's not like biosecurity is showing up with handcuffs or anything like that. I would really like to find out who the person is in Newcastle and speak to them directly, this lady with her hives, because perhaps this is the course of action people need to start taking, and perhaps with a bit of pushback. I think right now it's just very easy for them to do this. If people stop surrendering their land for these bait stations and the likes, and communities refuse to have them put in their local parks, we need pushback and non-compliance. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, until we can see some evidence. So even with writing and asking specific questions, the public don't get any information that's specific. We're not privy to any of the, findings that they're relying on. Yeah.
And it's not working because the purple zones and the red zones are expanding.
Yep.
There's been no success whatsoever. So it doesn't make any sense that they would continue with a strategy that's clearly not providing any remedy whatsoever.
Yeah, and all they talk about in that letter is cost benefit, didn't they? What they talked about what they're determining and how they're looking at it is technically feasible and cost beneficial to eradicate. So they're still saying it's feasible to do it and it's cost beneficial to eradicate. So they're not looking at, the environmental effects, or they're not mentioning anything else within that except for those two. That's the framework they're looking at this from.
I was talking to a fellow the other day, and apparently even the concept of registering your bees is a fairly new thing. I mean, everyone's got to register their dogs and their cats and their bees and all that sort of stuff. And years ago, none of this was even necessary to register things. You get to keep bees. You could keep these things and guinea pigs and that without just have them in your backyard and look after them, as all you were expected to do. And not everyone did that, but most people did. If they motivated enough to keep these things, they look after them. But it's just been another process of pinpointing exactly where the bees are and all that kind of stuff to earmark where the bees are being kept and all that sort of stuff. This is all very strange what's going on. It's particularly, when they acknowledge that the poison now is in the hives, and it's not. There's still been no mention of how long the poison is going to remain in the hives, and that's why I'm going to be very interested in these results. And candidly, I mean, I'm guessing that these testing labs are DPI owned and operated labs, and I've got to ask the question: do we know that the results that come back are going to be legit or not? I mean, is that not a fair question?
It's suspicious enough that the only option we were originally given was Dresden, Germany, and now all of a sudden this lab's popped up in Wagga. that they can conveniently utilize.
Yeah.
Where was that back in November when we were asking the question?
Yeah. Well, you have a food forest. What's the effect of killing bees and native bees and other pollinators through the use of Fipronil with being able to, keep a food forest going?
Well, from what I've seen is, I don't know whether my food forest has become some sort of haven, because I've noticed an increase. The only thing I saw a decrease in this year, and I think it had more to do with the weather, was the monarch butterflies, because we follow them very closely. But I noticed it last year, it had dropped off, and this year it seems to be a lot later. Usually they came out September, October. Last year it was December, and this year it wasn't until February that they started. But they're still in my garden now, and usually it's finished up by now. So I've noticed a delay and a decrease. I mean, we used to have this abundance of the chrysalises, and I've probably seen 4 this year. But everything else, we're getting like a influx of native birds in my front yard. Lots of hoverflies, heaps of bees, lots of blue-banded bees. So if anything, it shows how much is up here that can potentially get killed. I'm in a purple zone, so I believe that the bait stations aren't in my area. It's the red zones.
It's in the red zone.
I have friends in the red zones that grow veggies that have said nothing. There is nothing.
Because under the Greater Cities Commission, the Central Coast is pinpointed as a food hub. So that's interesting, isn't it? So the Greater Cities Commission was formed April last year or May last year, and they put out an industry report in January, and Central Coast is going to be a food hub.
I think it's going to be a synthetic food hub.
It's what do they call it? It's ag tech.
Yeah, they're gonna have their synthetic pollinators. That I was always incredibly motivated by the massive permaculture movement here.
Yep.
The community gardens. I mean, San Remo Community Garden is just becoming amazing. There's one at Doyleson, which is just minutes up the road. I know that many people in the area that have amazing, abundant food gardens, and the fact that this has all come here, it's kind of ironic, because I mean, with all the doom and gloom we've been facing, I've been like, well, I think our community can get together and become pretty self-sufficient, so we can kind of survive anything. But now I'm starting to wonder how that's actually going to survive what's going on with our pollinators. And I mean, the pollinators that I see in my food forest is ridiculous, and to think that they could all be wiped out is just devastating. It's absolutely, I mean, I'm talking to my husband about building a greenhouse over my yard to try and somehow protect what I've built. And I mean, I homeschool my kids, I teach my kids in that garden, and it's looking like it's going to get completely destroyed. And the other thing that blows my mind is the amount of alternative treatments there are out there that are organic. I mean, they're not even sending us out cheat sheets on funguses and plants we could grow, like rhubarb, that deter the Varroa mite. There's absolutely no effort for any of that. It's just chemicals, wipe everything out, and it just doesn't make any sense. Especially at this part of the journey where it's becoming obvious that this particular program isn't working, because these areas are only expanding. Even professionals are now saying Varroa mite is here, so let's stop killing everything.
I keep hearing that, I keep hearing it's just rumors. Oh, the DPI is starting to think, if it comes up in a couple more areas, they're going to stop. But it doesn't seem to be like that from that letter that we received.
And it's just the what's the word, the extra, like the native birds, the other insects that are going to get wiped out here, like
fauna.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Collateral damage, that how it's going to be at a massive scale,
and they're not looking at that.
It just doesn't make any sense.
No, they don't seem to be assessing that as a risk and a risk cost benefit when they're looking at their measures. So just so people who might be listening to this the first time, Fipronil's been put down in the red zones. Most of the Central Coast is in a red zone, aren't they? now.
Yeah.
I think it's most of it is. And
They're
Fipronil,
serving sugar water, which is going to attract so many different
well,
kinds of
what
fauna.
they say, and it's the Native Bee Association, something like that, and they're called something like that. They put out something saying, so what ends up happening is the bees, the honeybees go to the Fipronil traps, which are in the, in the forests, in the bush. They then take it back to tree trunks. They die, but the contaminated honey is in the tree trunks, and that stays active for 3 years. So then you have the native bees visiting there. You have other pollinators, other insects, and you have birds and mammals that can go there, and it's contaminated for 3 years.
This is not responsible. And the organics, like I say, the timing, I suppose for me and for many other people, you've already said that there's lots of people very busy. I'm here daily looking after my brother, and I haven't got time to clean the house. I mean, I'm just down here every day because he is my priority right now, is looking after him. Yeah. And the thing is to sit down and read these alternative measures, these organics you can use, the fungicides, and all that kind of stuff, funguses you can use, and other alternative treatments. I just have not had the time to sit down and read these. But you would think that the DPI and the others, I mean, these things like, okay, what'd you say to grow?
Oh, the rhubarbs are apparently pretty good. There's
that's free. I mean, that's not. There's no cost in that. You don't have to go and buy that off any commercial seller of these goods. You can just buy the rhubarb seeds and grow them yourself, and it may very well be effective. Well, let's explore that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you want to include this in your video, but my plan is right now we've ripped down the front house now on our double block. Because we've built the new house, we're going to level that construction zone now, and I'm going to maintain the food forest. I have got a section for my hives, expand the food forest, sorry. And my goal around the hives is I'm going to check out Paul Stammen's fungus suggestions. I'm going to find out what all these alternative plants are. I'm going to build a haven around my beehives. I'm going to put my no trespass sign on that they're not coming onto my property. I have got a lawyer that's giving me legal advice in this regards, and I'll take it as far as I can. But we really, really need other people to jump on board. There needs to be a group of us. If one person is singled out, they can be squashed. I believe that the other people that are into permaculture in my area, when they see what I'm doing, will hopefully follow suit. If one thing's inspiring, there's a lot of people not liking this now. So they don't want to see everything destroyed. I mean, I've got kookaburras. I've bought a bird book because the influx of birds that are coming onto my property at the moment, I don't know whether they're coming from these red zones, but it's incredible. They're all up on the electricity lines and looking down at my property and eating my fruit, which doesn't bother me. And if that's just my property, like, are we going to see this massive migration of fauna fleeing these red zones because of the Fipronil bait traps everywhere? It's horrible. It's really
pretty irresponsible.
And maybe off topic, but then you take into consideration these wind turbines and what that's going to do to our dolphins, our whales. I surf. We see penguins, we see dolphins, we see whales, we see turtles at Cabbage Bay all the time, Laura Head. So there's an attack on all of that now. Like, what's going on? It's absurd. Gropers, like the marine life is unbelievable, and there's just absolutely no consideration for it. I just keep hearing, financial, it's all finance. There's got to be more to everything than just the bottom line.
Yeah, so we're putting on a talk on March the 15th, on Saturday, March
April the 15th.
April the 15th. I think it's I'll put the flyer up on this video, with an environmentalist, Michael Swift, who's a long-term grassroots environmentalist, who speaks out about how green is this renewable energy really, and the measures that are being brought in. And also a farmer that's trying to fight this wind turbines out west on his farming land, because it's just going to devastate the farming community out there. So there's just so many ramifications to things, and there's so little dialogue in the mainstream media or in people's consciousness around, let's really have a good look at all the effects and make a good decision that's based from the community. And that wind turbine area is already earmarked for a French nuclear company to be the ones creating that. It's owned by the French government.
There's a lithium super battery going in Budgie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I think it's the old power station is going to become some sort of lithium super battery, the biggest one.
Is that's Lake Munmara?
Yes. Yeah.
They gave that contract to BlackRock. BlackRock has $10 trillion in assets and is actually referred to as the fourth arm of the US government. So they have shares in all most media, in basically everything they've got shares in. So that's who the state government decided to give a contract to.
And how is lithium eco-friendly? It just
mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling. I think the Central Coast were really under a lot of plans are coming in on the Central Coast currently. Thank you. Will you get back in touch when you hear the next?
As soon as they come out with this testing, I guess that's the next thing we're waiting for, or with baits, with strips, or if we turn into a red zone.
I'm pretty sure they are under the impression that we get the test done, it comes back that it's 0.0004%, blah, 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 and okay, now we can continue. But I'm going to say, no, guys, I'm not interested. I've already got my no trespass sign up on my property. I've advised the host of my other hive to do the same. And we're going to get copies of that questionnaire or that the
fee schedule.
The fee schedule on that. And we're going to proceed down that path and say, like if you're going to come onto my property, you're not going to do that with my permission, and you will be trespassing.
Okay,
and that's where my hives are.
Yeah, and for people who want to also get in touch with the DPI to ask for testing out at Wagga Wagga, is it just going through? Where do you go through?
Just ring the DPI and say, look, we've had the strips put in our hives, especially if they put them in while you had your supers on, which is what they did for us, which they've already admitted they shouldn't have done. Now you guys are obliged to test the hives, and we know you've got a facility in Wagga now. So don't let them direct you to Dresden, Germany, and get your hives tested. And I'm going to push further and try and get some way to confirm that my results are legitimate as well. Because I'm not. I might even drive out there and see what this lab is.
I think I'd like. I think we need to speak to our solicitor and say to him, what can they give us that's legally binding?
Yeah.
And these are your results, and it's legally binding. And not just something written on a scrap of paper, and likewise, if it comes back, anything short of completely clean, but even then, I'm just not confident with this. I want to try these other things. I want to try the rhubarb. I want to try illicit stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm getting to the point now where I'm not waiting for them to come and destroy my hives, because I'm not going to let them on the property. I'm going to set my hives up, and I'm going to run my bees the way I was running them. And I'll check them for Varroa, for sure. But at the up until recent times, I just didn't know if I was going to keep my hives or whether they're going to come and destroy them. And now we've got this set up with the no trespass sign. We've got something to actually act lawfully to stop people coming on our property and protect our hives, for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you for what you're doing too.
Yeah.